The energy's been pretty good at home. I mean, the kids are just like, they're just there all the time. Like, they don't go anywhere. They don't go to school. They never leave. Cool, we're doing this, right? Hey, I'm Chris Morocco, and we're gonna be making weeknight meatballs. I sort of took the architecture of BA's Best Meatballs and I stripped it down to the bare essentials. What is it that ultimately makes a great meatball? So, so right now I'm in Philadelphia, where I recently moved, just so we could have a little bit more room for everybody to do virtual school, remote work, all of that. We rented a studio space just because it was a little bit easier in terms of all the people we kind of needed. It means a lot to be here right now, because obviously we've taken a break from filming, and so much has been going on at Bon Appetit. And I've stayed really quiet about a lot of things. There haven't really been any easy answers to a lot of the issues that we've had. I've really invested the time in kind of working with the folks, within BA to try to make things better, to try to put better systems in place to support all of our staffers. And it also kind of reflects who we are now, kind of as a team. And it really, includes a lot of voices from people who, I care about, still care about, who are still part of this brand in one way or another. And I think we took a good amount of time to really, take a hard break and look at how we're doing things and how we can be better. So, just on a personal note, it means a lot. I think, what I kind of realized kind of getting into so much time spent with my family, I really had to kind of go back to the fundamentals. I needed a meatball recipe that could be done incredibly quickly on a weeknight. It's right there in the title in case you didn't catch that. Weeknight meatballs. Okay, it's moist and it's tender. Key things obviously are the meat and then the bread mixture. And for a weeknight version, gotta go with breadcrumb, aka in this case, panko. In the past, I've really enjoyed searing the meatballs off on the stovetop. In this version, we're gonna do it in the oven. Should we make some sauce? Let's see what's happening with this garlic. The sauce isn't part of the recipe per se. You could use kind of any high quality jarred marinara sauce, but we're gonna make our own, just so there's a little bit more going on here. It's also nice to finish the meatballs in the sauce a little bit, kind of get it saucy. So nobody wants to just see meatballs on a plate, right? Am I right? Gonna do 1/4 cup of olive oil. No point in skimping, not today, maybe not ever. And then I'm gonna thinly slice this garlic. And there's probably 8 cloves here, but I feel like anecdotally, we're really talking about 6 good sized cloves. So we're just gonna do this gentle. I am not going for browning. I'm just going for a little bit of golden around the edges. I was actually gonna look for a pinch of crushed red pepper flakes. Not to make the sauce spicy, but it just kind of opens up the flavor a little bit. Maybe a pinch of Mrs. Dash. It's good to get the lay of the land, Do you not just walk into other people's homes and immediately start smelling whatever in their fridge and stuff? No? Is that just me? Mrs. Dash extra spicy seasoning blend. Here we go. Just for a little pop, just a prickle, old saucier's trick, a little pinch of cayenne pepper, just wake up the flavor. We'll just ignore the fact that there's literally 18 other ingredients in there. So basil, you get a completely different, well, not completely different because it still tastes like basil, but you get a completely different set of flavor characteristics to the basil when you kind of extract them at the higher heat that the oil is currently at. Sometimes when you put it into just the tomato sauce, it tends to go a little bit browner. Fun fact. We'll see if that's actually what happens. Watch it turn totally brown town. Anyway, here's the thing about canned tomatoes. High quality tomatoes are just key. So I like to kind of just lightly crush them up as they add them. Yes, they kind of go all over the place when you do it like this, but what am I gonna do? Bring a blender from home? I don't think so. You know what I friggin' hate? Diced tomatoes. They never break down. Who wants that? So we're just gonna kind of get this to a slow roll and keep it at a slow roll. So this is incredibly coarse salt. The coarsest kosher salt I've ever seen. So I'm gonna put in what feels like an unnaturally small amount just because by volume, it's just gonna be a lot saltier. Does that make sense? Okay, so next. So this is why these are weeknight meatballs, okay? Everything kind of goes into one bowl, and then we're gonna bake these on a rim baking sheet. I guess, this is what happens when you don't bring the friggin' blender and you can't make blender parm. We're gonna grate Parmesan by hand. It's not gonna be all fun and like ASMR. Like, how sad is this? Who can live like this? You can just take the piece of parm, cut the rind off, cut it into, kind of 1/2 to 1 inch cubes, and then just blend it in a high-powered blender. And it comes out beautiful, where it's all kind of like pleasantly dense and pebbly. It sprinkles so nicely. Blender parm. We need about an ounce or 1/2 cup. We're gonna do 2 eggs. Sometimes, if I don't feel like measuring, I'll just count it out, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, kind of like a bartender's pour, where you just like 3 seconds for each shot, I don't know. I'm just gonna mix these up. This is 1.5 cups of panko. I just wanted to check this measurement. Okay, whatever, we'll do it all. And you need to hydrate your breadcrumbs with, some kind of liquid, whether it's like water, milk, broth. Otherwise, your breadcrumb starts to pull moisture from the meat. You are kind of setting yourself up for a bit of a drier, tougher meatball. No good. Well, so this is just with the egg, and it kind of looks like, oh, well, the breadcrumb is kind of wet, so we're good, right? We're not. So we're gonna go with 1/2 cup of milk. That's 1/4, and we'll do another 1/4. This starts out looking kind of wet and, let's face it, a little bit gnarly, but that's the secret. This is creating what's known as a panade, a breadcrumb mixture that's gonna be used to lighten and moisten something. Key stuff. So this is about, let's call this a teaspoon of garlic powder, full of umami, full of flavor, without having to kind of chop up raw garlic. Some of you will, of course, point out that that's exactly what I did with the sauce, but imagine you're using jarred sauce and you're trying to move pretty quickly. A good amount of black pepper. So we're gonna call this 1 ounce of grated Parmesan cheese. Now we're kind of getting into a little bit of a coarse paste sort of territory. And that means it's gonna disperse very evenly and very readily throughout your meat mixture. You don't wanna bite into a meatball and have a little pocket of bread and a little pocket of meat. Not where it's at. All of this, okay, for 1 pound of meat. For ground beef, my standard is 80-20 chuck. Sure, 85-15 if you have to. 90-10, just walk away, make something else, get some pork chops, okay? Because it's not meatball night. I'm gonna completely and thoroughly mix 1/4 of the meat into the breadcrumb mixture, because I don't wanna put all of it at once. The reason for that is because you then have 2 very separate mixtures trying to combine all at once, and that is going to lead you down the road of overmixing, and you create toughness. So by bringing this a little bit closer to this, it means the rest of it can be put in and brought together relatively quickly. Does that make sense? If you start to kind of turn one into the other, the rest of the meat will go in there. This is not making any sense. It's not making any sense. What am I even trying to say? Does that make sense? So the rest of the meat can then go in, and we're good. Basically, the goal was to create a very homogeneous mixture. It's pretty supple. So what I realized is if we make slightly bigger meatballs, okay, a bigger meatball will actually brown on the outside without overcooking in the center, all right? So let me see if I can eyeball this into 8 roughly equal balls. Do you ever get really competitive with yourself? I use a good amount of olive oil on my hands. I want them to be coated in the oil, and I want there to be a good barrier of oil on the baking sheet. It just means you get a little bit better heat transfer. Delightfully imperfect balls here. I'm even gonna do a little extra drizzle of oil on these guys. It just doesn't hurt. You could get away with searing this on the stovetop if you wanted to, but to keep it in the kind of the weeknight lane, we're gonna go in the oven. Temperature is 425. I'm leaning towards the top of the oven because I want to get some browning on the surface of the meatball, and you usually tend to get pretty nice like reflected heat off the top of your oven. And then when are we checking in? Like 10 minutes? Oh yeah, how about 15? We're gonna check in on those in like 15 minutes. I don't have a timer. Yeah, my timer is currently being held hostage by this child. So anyway, that's how it goes. Okay, we're gonna take a little peeky peek here. This is right at the 15-minute mark. So because it is a wetter mixture, these meatballs are going to kind of pancake out just a little bit. Good bit of browning, we're still a little bit tender on the inside. See how the whole thing kind of flexes there? A fish spatula, indispensable for separating meatball from baking sheet and keeping all that lovely browning on the meatball itself. That's what I'm talking about. Maybe 5 more minutes. Meanwhile, sauce looking pretty good. Fortunately, I don't have my wooden spoon. All right, we're gonna hit it with a little more salt and just keep it going. Like incredibly coarse salt. You know how basil has that like peppery little bite to it? Raw basil? Like you get that in there, you know, just from like those few sprigs. Just saying. I feel like we went a little bit over here. I could lie and be like, yeah, 165 on the dot, but we're actually at like 175, but that's cool. All right, so sauce, that's good. It's very rich, flavors are nice. I feel like we could like bump up salt even a little bit more. Just like completely out of sorts with this really coarse kosher salt. I'm obviously being a bit of a pain about it, but like it's a real thing, all right? It's always nice when you can kind of finish the cooking of the meatball in your sauce to let it cook through. So my grandma would simmer her meatballs for hours and they were really good. They were kind of falling apart, but what I started to notice, there's kind of like a continuum of, you know, kind of how long to keep your meatballs in there, and you should like mess around with it because I think you'll find that after a while, like your sauce becomes more flavorful, but kind of at the expense of your meatball. All right? It's like A Beautiful Mind or like Carrie Matheson, you know, it's just like pieces of paper, like photographs. I just think it's important for people to know all this stuff just gets like pent up, you know, and it has to come out. But seriously though, this is what it's about for me. How do you connect with the people who are interacting with your recipes? I'm still intimately involved in telling these stories in print and on our websites. To not be part of how we tell these stories in video, it's not an option for me, you know? We're committed to a different way of doing things moving forward, but to not be part of like that bigger picture, you know, for me, being in charge of the test kitchen, it just like, it wouldn't make sense. Being back with some of the folks on the video production side means a lot to me. This is like part of how I want to continue to tell stories around food and talk about meatballs and go on like, you know, 15-minute like long monologues about blender parm because it's important, you know? So can I just talk about something for a sec? That little bit of basil, that braised, you know, in with the sauce, like I'm totally here for that. Look, it's not like bright green anymore, but it's not brown either. Maybe it's just wishful thinking. Let's just use the knife just to break into one, okay? Very little resistance. Very soft, pretty homogeneous, lots of flavor. You don't bring a knife to a meatball fight, right? Because if you need a knife to cut through your meatball, you've definitely done something wrong. So forks only, or even spoons, you know? It's a funny story. I was so terrified of that really coarse salt. I didn't put nearly enough in the meatball, but that's fine. It's gonna be fine. There it is. You know, everything you like about meatballs, but just kind of stripped down to the most weeknight friendly version. You don't even have to make your own sauce. So it's really nice to be back making meatballs with you guys, for sure. I've missed this, seriously. Lord knows I don't get out that much, so very nice to be here. This is like one of those like terrible moments where I really wish there was somebody else to taste the food. Even like when I was shooting at home, at least like I had the kids like running around causing problems. It sucks not to have people taste your food. Cool.